So today we're making banana jam. I don't know about your house, but in our house, when we get bananas, we either go right through them or we have a ton of them left. This week we had a lot of them left, so we're gonna make banana jam. For the jam recipe we use, it's 2 cups of fruit, 2 cups of sugar, and about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. It's typically recommended to use the store-bought, pre-juiced lemon juice, and that's because the acidity level of that has already been tested. We use fresh lemons though. I personally think either one's fine. It's completely up to you what you do though. While they're rolling the lemons around, we're gonna get some things going on the stove. We've got 1 pot going with, I'm using the reusable lids, and I tossed 1 metal lid in there just to show you the difference in them. And we've got our water going for a water bath canner. Now we're warming this up. It's important to sterilize your jars before you use them, so that's what this is gonna do. We're gonna bring it to a boil, and after a couple minutes of boiling, we'll cut it off and just let the jars stay nice and warm in there till we're ready to use them. We're not going to cut this burner orange just yet, but it's important to have a good size pot for your jam. They make all sorts of different pots you can use. I'm just using a regular old pot. This one's an enamel coated cast iron. It can be really any type of pot. The most important thing to remember though is that you don't want to fill this up too much with your jam because it does expand and will make a very hot sticky mess if you put too much in it. Alright, while those jars are coming to a boil, we're going to make sure we've got everything set out that we need. We've got our jar lifter and our rings. We're using regular mouth rings for this. We've got a spatula to help scrape the jam, a funnel to help fill our jars, a thermometer. This is really important to have since we're using a no pectin recipe. We're going to need to bring this up to 220 degrees, so you need to make sure your thermometer goes that high. A set of tongs, and the metal lid lifter. All right, so the girls are gonna go ahead and do the bananas. We're gonna do 6 cups of mashed bananas.
I am doing another pile.
Yep, you can help with the bananas too.
Okay, I'll sit. Getting mad, Oops. What do? I think we need to do the let's do Germany. There. Got it. You threw it too far that time. Banana. Eddie, drop it. Wow.
So we're heating these lids up to use. I mostly use the reusable ones at this point, but I did throw a metal one in there just to show you the difference in how to use them. If you can see for the metal one, there's little bubbles on it. That's about exactly where we want them in terms of heating them up. You don't actually want to bring this to a boil. We're going to go ahead and start our jam here and put the bananas in the pan first and heat those up. So this is 6 cups of mashed bananas. And we're going to heat it up and bring it to a boil.
Is it done?
Nope, it's just getting started. Our jam has started to boil, so I'm going to go ahead and add 6 cups of sugar. So we're going to stir it up really well and then get our candy thermometer in there to track the temperature. And if any sugar got on the sides, just make sure to scrape that in there. So this is what it looks like now. So this is what it looks like after adding the sugar. You can see it's gotten a little bit more liquidy, but that is completely normal. Now once you can tell that all the sugar is kind of dissolved into it, you're going to go ahead and cut your heat up a little bit higher, and we're going to see if we can get it up to 220. A lot of candy thermometers have this handy little clip on it that you can stick to the side of your pan, We're going to stick ours in here, and we just want to make sure that it doesn't actually touch the bottom. You want it just barely off the bottom. And what I'll do is throughout cooking this, I'll be lifting it up some. That way it's out of the way, and I can scrape the bottom underneath of it because we don't want any of it to burn. We're up to about 200 degrees now, and as you can see, this has risen a fair bit. It also gets really hot and splatters, so be careful because it does burn a fair bit. So it's been just about 2 minutes since we took it off the heat here. We cut the stove off, and as you can tell, it's got a nice golden color to it. But we're going to continue to stir this with some jams and jellies like strawberry jam and wild berry jam especially. It gets a lot of this foam you can see here. You can add a tiny bit of butter to help cut that back. With the banana jam, it's not enough that I really worry about it. We're going to take the jars out. You're just going to slide this in, grab it from around the neck of the jar. Make sure you dump all the water out. And set it on just a doubled over towel, works just fine. And we're just going to do about 2 or 3 of them at a time. Fill them up and put them back in the water. And that's mostly because you don't want the jars to cool off too much before you put the really hot jam in there. It can cause your jars to crack if you put something really hot like this banana jam right now straight into a room temperature jar. These are still really hot, so be careful, but we're going to go ahead and switch some of our burners around here and get them filled up. I just used any old ladle, and we're going to slide this jar about as close as we can to the opening of the pot because we don't want any more to drip or leak than we have to. And we're just going to put it right in there. Now for the metal ring that I'm going to do first, it needs a 1/4 inch headspace. We're just going to eyeball it here. After you do it for a while, you kind of get used to that. We're going to use our little metal or magnet on a stick and pick up our little lid. And we just want to shake the extra water off of it. And then we come, oh, I'm not sure if you can see too well here. So with the reusable lids, you're going to leave 1/2 inch of headspace here. And then you're going to come get one of the reusable lids. You're going to set it down and then get a little red gasket. And the red gasket just sits down on top of the ring just like this. So it's going to sit down on there just like that. You're going to set the lid and ring on top of here. You want to make sure it's nice and centered. And then you're going to get your ring, slide it over top of it, and with about 2 fingers, you don't want to be pressing too terribly hard, but you're going to press down on the center of the lid and spin it until the jar, tighten it down until the jar starts to spin. You don't want it too tight. You also don't want it too loose, otherwise it'll pop off. So it takes a little bit of working with to figure out what the right, how many turns to do. We're just going to keep this going. So for water bath canning, you want the water to be at least 1 to 2 inches above the jars here. So I don't know if you can see there, but that's a good 1.5 inches. If you need to add more, feel free to. There's no problem with that. It might just take it a little bit longer to heat up. And we're going to leave some of our empty jars in there to keep them from rattling around too much. But we're going to heat it up and bring it to a boil. Now that this has come to a rolling boil, we're going to process it for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes is up, we'll cut it off and let it cool off for 5 minutes and remove them. So for our last jar, it didn't quite make it up to the 1/2 inch mark. So instead of canning it and wasting a lid, we're just going to use one of our reusable lids. This one is not safe for canning, but it works great for after you open a jar you can just take this and set it on there, and it helps keep it nice and fresh in your fridge. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to let this cool off, and then we'll put it in the fridge. We gave these 5 minutes to cool off, and it is time to take them out. We're just going to set them on a dish towel, and I'll show you what we do for the reusable ones. For the metal one here, you'll hear it pop as soon as it seals, and it doesn't take long. For the reusable ones, you want to get a towel, hold the bottom of the jar, and tighten down the top. You'll feel that it has a little bit of room to tighten down, and you'll just want to tighten it down finger tight. You don't want it too terribly tight. Once they've cooled all the way, you'll be able to lift them by just holding around the lid like that. And that lets you know that you've got a really good seal on it. If it comes off when you do that, then you didn't have a good seal. If you just canned it, you can put it in your fridge and eat it. If it's been sitting on your shelf though, and it comes off that easy, then you need to dump it. The same thing is true with the reusable lids. You should always be able to lift it up just by your fingertips, holding just the lid. You'll want to, when these are done cooling, you'll want to wash them off, make sure they all have a good seal, and store them without the rings on it. If you seal it with the ring, sometimes that will cause what's called a false seal, so it'll hold the lid down too tight on it, and if it were to come off, you may not know it. So there's no reason to leave them on there. They do make it more prone to rusting as well, so I just take them off and store them just like this.